Disney remakes. We all hate them, but we continue to see them anyway. And while Disney seems to love making live-action spin-off films of their already existing animated properties, the most successful remakes tend to be direct adaptations of their beloved classics. And as each and every one of them seems to come and go, they only grow more and more hated. The Mulan remake was trash, and everyone I know agrees on that. The Lion King remake was awful, and most people seem to agree on that as well. But if there's any Disney remake out there that deserves way more disdain than it's already gotten, it would have to be Aladdin 2019. I remember when the second trailer was unveiled during the 2019 Grammy Awards, and being shocked at how bad it looked. And the internet had a similar reaction as well.
You really don't know who I am. Genie, wishes, lamb, none of that ringing a bell.
But then a few months had passed, and when the film finally came out, everyone for some reason rushed to the theater to see it, and everyone seemed satisfied. And I can't for the love of me understand why. Especially when you compare it to the original Aladdin, which is one of the best and most imaginative musicals Disney has ever done, to this soulless, corporately manufactured pile of garbage. I despise this movie. Every single creative choice and decision feels like it was performed by an AI. I can't think of a more artificial and soul-crushing experience churned out by a major Hollywood studio in the past few years. The last time I looked at a live-action remake with the Last Airbender movie, it was a pretty easy target in retrospect. Because as for this film, I actually know people who unironically defend it. But if the live-action remakes of The Lion King, Dumbo, and Mulan attract a lot of backlash from the original fans, this one should receive the same negative reception as those films, because it suffers from the same fundamental issues. Instead of people deciding to spend their money on the most innovative blockbusters being made today, like Spider-Verse, Dune, or even Spielberg's West Side Story, we can unfortunately say the battle has been lost to cookie-cutter, corporately manufactured garbage like this. There's so much CGI in this film, from the environments to the monkey, to the tiger, to the parrot, to the genie, that you might as well have made this into an animated film. Oh wait, you already did! I get that you need CGI for some of these things, but this movie would have felt more genuine if you actually spent a good amount of the budget on perfecting the visual effects, instead of spending it on Will Smith's already fat stacking salary. I noticed in the behind the scenes videos of this movie how they didn't really have a frame of reference for the CGI characters in this film, which is probably the primary reason why they didn't look very good. Even the way the movie begins is horrible. We see the genie telling a story to some children on a boat for some reason, but why? In the original film, the first time the genie appears is after Aladdin rubs that magic lamp, and it's one of the best character introductions to any film.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck. Hang on a second. Wow! Wow!
But here, they decided to tell the story from the genie's perspective. So when you finally do see the genie in the Cave of Wonders, it no longer comes as a surprise. You're just watching the film now, waiting for that moment to happen when the genie appears. And they did it for no reason other than to differentiate itself from the original. You'll see a lot of that in this film. Just changes that were made not to enhance the story, but just to make it to the 2-hour mark. Then we get to the scene where we first meet Aladdin, and it's a behind shot of him waiting in line, which is the worst way you could possibly introduce this character. In the original, they literally throw us into the middle of an action scene, where Aladdin is just running away from a bunch of swordsmen for stealing some bread. It's so simple, but it works. We understand everything we need to know about this character from this one scene alone. Center Row did a really good video on this, also comparing it to the remake of Aladdin, so I'd recommend checking that video out if you haven't already. Another thing I fucking hate about this movie, okay, I hate referring to this movie as an actual film, so from now on I'm just going to refer to it as a thing. Another thing I hate about this thing is Aladdin himself. Aladdin from the original film had such charisma, he had some snarky charm to him that could have only been shown through animation. Here, the actor for Aladdin only displays one facial expression throughout the entire movie. He always has the same face on him. Seriously, I feel like I'm not even staring at a real person. This guy feels so robotic and unreal, I just want to punch him in his stupid face. Then Aladdin finally meets Princess Jasmine, and after some pretty stiff and lifeless action choreography, we eventually cut to another awful aspect of this awful movie, the auto-tune.
One swing, ahead of the sword. I steal only what I can't afford.
This is a recurring problem in a lot of the live-action Disney remakes, like the awful auto-tune in the live-action Beauty and the Beast remake. Here, the singing sounds so robotic because of the auto-tune, it actually pisses me off.
Take that!
If this doesn't prove to you this film feels like it was made by an algorithm, I don't know what to tell you, man. Then after that, we are introduced to probably the biggest downgrade of a villain in this era of live-action remakes, Jafar.
I am your master now. Genie, grant me my first wish. I wish to rule on high as Sultan.
What do they call you?
Aladdin.
Aladdin. People like us must be realistic.
Us.
You see, I was once like you. A common thief.
One of the greatest attributes to the films from the Disney Renaissance are their memorable villains. Even people who haven't seen those movies have at least heard of some of those villains, because that's how iconic they are. This new butchered portrayal of Jafar squanders all the fun and villainous attributes of his animated counterpart, that you could summarize his casting by what I said about the actor who played Firelord Ozai in the live-action Avatar movie. It's like they got this hobo off the street and got him a costume from Party City and said, "There you go, looks fine to me." Now I want to make it clear, when I'm criticizing the acting and the characters in the film, I'm not criticizing the actors themselves. They're just underserved by a bad script and poor execution. They also added this new character who's like a friend to Princess Jasmine named Dahlia, who serves no other purpose in this movie other than to be a love interest to the Genie, which is pretty weird. So I guess the Genie canonically banged a woman in this movie at the very beginning, which is how he got children, I guess. That's kind of weird. By the time we get to the moment where Aladdin encounters the Cave of Wonders, I feel like we would have been at the halfway point of the original Aladdin. And the scene here plays out just like the original.
Abu, no! Abu, no! Abu, no! Abu, no!
Jafar abandons Aladdin to die as the cave is falling to shambles, and the Genie appears from the lamp after Aladdin rubs it. Now the one thing I know a lot of people have been praising about the movie is the performance of Will Smith as the Genie, and I don't really get why. I mean, he's not doing a bad job or anything, he's just not bringing a lot to the table. I know it's unfair to compare him to the original Genie portrayed by the legendary Robin Williams, but Williams himself fit the role so perfectly because he was able to do different impressions and voices. He was both a voice actor and a live performer. As for Will Smith, while he is charming and charismatic, he doesn't have that same vocal talent that Williams had.
Can your friends go?
There's not a lot I can say about the rest of the film in terms of plot, besides the bad acting, the bad singing, bad directing, and pretty much every aspect of the movie being 100 times worse than the original. But I haven't even talked about the climax of the movie. Holy shit, does it look bad. The part near the end where Jafar turns into a genie looks downright repugnant and embarrassing. It essentially devolves into a bad video game. This genuinely looks like a CGI sequence from the early 90s when the right technology wasn't available yet. Except this thing cost $200 million to make, which is even more embarrassing. There are other sequences in this film that are downright ugly to look at. The sequences at night look so bleak and lifeless, especially the new rendition of A Whole New World. It's so hard to make out what I'm supposed to be looking at, compared to the beautiful, lush colors of the original during the same musical number. All of the wonder and visual aesthetic that directors John Musker and Ron Clements poured into the original is completely gone here, and all we get is a soulless clone of the original without any of the qualities that made it great. What literally is the point of this thing existing if you're going to make it the exact same as the original except shittier in every conceivable way? Say what you will about the Mulan remake, as bad as it was, it did try to change things up a lot, which was one of the primary reasons everyone hated it, of course. But at least it tried something different even if it failed. It didn't feel like it was created specifically by an algorithm. It felt like it was made by a director who wanted to make a really unique movie that was butchered by studio interference. The only thing I could tell from this film is that it was a big paycheck for everyone involved. Now what if this film was significantly different from the original story, to the point where it wasn't the same anymore? What if they made it some kind of Indiana Jones adventure where the genie or animal sidekicks weren't in it anymore, and it was about Aladdin getting down into this weird cult like in Temple of Doom, that kept Princess Jasmine hostage or something? I don't know. Not saying that would have been good, but at least it would have been more interesting, instead of this focus-tested and cynical result of a film we got here. If they really needed to remake this film, and I mean really need to remake it, like their life was depending on it or something, maybe go a different direction, like making it similar to a Mel Brooks comedy, because the elements that stood out from the original were the comedic parts, none of which this movie has. In fact, the comedy in this film was downright the opposite.
It's just as much a pleasure for me, Your Highness, sir. You look very serene.
I guess all I'm trying to say about this movie is that it's really bad and I don't understand why anyone likes it. Not saying you're dumb if you like it or anything. I mean, I know this movie is for children or whatever, but like, there are way better movies you could be watching, and I hate that this movie was successful. I hate that it made $1 billion at the box office for just making the same movie. Disney has been doing this for like years now. They've been making the same movie as the original, and they make $1 billion off of it. It's like the cheapest and easiest scam they could pull off. It's insane, man.